We've never been this far before. Is the Antichrist alive and well? History will culminate in a demonic, despotic, anti-God regime on this earth. And the Antichrist is going to come on a platform of peace. So he's going to probably win, be Times Man of the Year. The velvet glove's going to come off. He's going to dominate the world.
Hey, before we get started today, I just wanted to say my team told me something that surprised me, and that is about half of you guys watching on YouTube, you are not subscribed to this channel. So if you do me a favor for just a minute, just look down and just click the subscribe button and the like button. Now, when you click the subscribe button, it just means you're going to get all the information that we put out. You're not going to miss information that could encourage you and equip you to live in these end times. Also, when you like it, it just means that more people find out about it. I want you to tell people about us, first of all, but also when you like it, it helps us tremendously. Would you take just a second and hit the subscribe and the like button so that all of you guys are subscribed and all of you guys are telling other people about us? That's going to be a huge blessing. Welcome to Tipping Point. I'm Jimmy Evans. We're going to go to the gathering again today. Let me remind you, in the month of December now, we have a special that we've never done this before. Buy one, get one free. If you buy an annual subscription for $77, Tipping Point, you get one for free. And so you can keep one for yourself. If you're a monthly subscriber, this is the way you can give a subscription for yourself, an annual subscription, and give one away. You can give both of them away to your kids, to your parents, to friends, to your pastor, to people that you know. And so buy one, get one free, $77. You get two annual subscriptions to endtimes.com. So go to endtimes.com right now and sign up, and you'll bless somebody. You can give two away, keep one for yourself, however you want to do that. But this is a special that we're running this month. Buy one, get one free, annual subscriptions. Now, right now, we're going to go to the gathering. This is Dr. Mark Hitchcock. He is a theologian. He has a PhD from Dallas Theological Seminary. He is a professor at Dallas Theological Seminary. He's also the senior pastor of Faith Bible Church in Edmond, Oklahoma. He is one of the contributors here at endtimes.com. Powerful, powerful teaching on the Antichrist. This is part one. Part two will be next week. Watch this.
I've heard a story one time about a couple of Jehovah's Witnesses. They were going around door to door, knocking on people's doors, and they come to this one guy's house. They knock on the door, and he lets them in, but he says, "Hey, go sit down in the living room." He said, "I need to go in the other room and check on something for a minute. I'll be right back." So he goes in the other room and comes back in there a few minutes later and sits down and looks at these two young men, and he says, "Now, what was it that you two guys wanted to talk with me about?" And they looked at him and they said, "We have no idea. We've never been this far before." And I think about that today in our world. We've never been this far before, obviously. I mean, just chronologically, we've never been this far before. But with things that are happening in our world, we've never been this far before. And I love Jimmy's message, just talking about things that are happening in our world today, these birth pains that are taking place. But I want to kind of piggyback on that now. And I want to address a topic that I want to talk about really in both sessions. And that is the Antichrist alive and well? Is the Antichrist alive and well? I was going to do two different messages really today, do this message and another one, but there's so much information I have in this message, I decided to do a two-part. So we're going to do part one this morning and part two this afternoon. Now, some of you might say, well, why are we going to talk about the Antichrist? Why is the Antichrist an important topic to discuss? Well, I'm going to get into this in a few moments, but the Antichrist is making headlines in our world today. Now, before we get to the book of Daniel, 2 Thessalonians, or Revelation, some of the biblical books that talk about the Antichrist, I want to just go back for a moment to the beginning and kind of give you the full arc or trajectory of what the Bible says about the Antichrist. And if you go all the way back to the very beginning, to Genesis chapter 3, we really have the original sin of humanity. And you remember the serpent comes to the woman, and the very first thing that he does, the very first words we have recorded of Satan in the Bible, is to question the word of God, to deny God's word. Has God said, "You shall not eat from any tree of the garden"? And then he goes on down further, and Satan says, "For God knows in the day that you eat of the fruit of the tree, you'll be like God, knowing good and evil." So the original sin is the man and the woman desiring to be like God. And John Lennox, I'm going to quote this from his book a little bit more and show that to you in a moment. But he said the rebellion against God that started in Genesis with satanic promise of becoming Homo Deus. Homo Deus is Latin for human God. Will reach a climax in this fearful self-styled Homo Deus. So all the way back in the Garden of Eden, the original sin is that man can become God, that you'll have a human God. And you think about the whole arc of history, history's going to climax with the Antichrist, who will be the ultimate Homo Deus. He's going to be someone who's going to come and he's going to proclaim that he is God. And that's where history ultimately is headed. It's where it began, but it's going to climax with a man who's going to come and proclaim that he is God. Think about it like this. History commences with the sin of man, but it's going to climax with the man of sin who's coming, the Antichrist. History will culminate in a demonic, despotic, anti-God regime on this earth. Now, the Antichrist is getting a lot of publicity these days, a lot of headlines about the Antichrist. There's a book, John C. Lennox just came out with a brand new book, God, AI, and the End of History. I've got a copy of it up here. I'm actually going to read from it in part 2. This book is so hot off the press. I just got it 2 days ago. I've been plowing through it, 625 pages. That I didn't have time to put these in PowerPoint, so I'll read from this. But John Lennox is an Oxford mathematician. He's retired now. He's from Northern Ireland originally, but he's written this massive book. Really, it's just a commentary on the book of Revelation, but he's titled it God, AI, and the End of History, Understanding the Book of Revelation in an Age of Intelligent Machines. You all know who this is, I guess. Joe Rogan, his podcast, he got, just multiplied millions of followers. He's had a man named Tim Dillon on. They've talked about the Antichrist. He's had another man on there recently named Peter Thiel. I'm going to talk quite a bit about Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, he had him on there and they had some long discussions about the Antichrist. But this is a picture here of Peter Thiel. In case you don't know who he is, he's the co-founder of PayPal. He founded a business, a company called Palantir. He's gay. He's a billionaire. He's what I've read recently, the 103rd richest man in the world. Now that varies all the time, day to day, who's the richest and where they're at. But a very wealthy billionaire, and he's been talking a great deal lately about the Antichrist. It's almost like an obsession. It's interesting. Palantir is a company he started that's a software platform that's into data mining. So basically, it's a surveillance. At its core, it's a surveillance company. And he named it Palantir, which is after one of the characters in Lord of the Rings. It's an orb. It's an all-seeing orb that can see everything that's going on. And so one man that I listened to made an interesting comment. He says, you have this man who's a billionaire who owns one of the major surveillance companies in the world, and he's obsessed with the Antichrist. So, yeah, you got to say, maybe he's the Antichrist, himself. But he's got an article. There's a headline called Apocalypse Now, Peter Thiel on Ancient Prophecies and Modern Tech. And at Oxford in 2023, he said, we're told that there's nothing worse than Armageddon, but perhaps there is. Perhaps we should fear the Antichrist. Perhaps we should fear the one world totalitarian state more than Armageddon. Going on here, he has a long interview with Ross Duchat, or I guess that's how you say his name, or Duche, in the New York Times. And there's a headline in the New York Times, Peter Thiel in the Antichrist. So I thought I'd just give, this is a little bit longer. The second one I'll play will be a little bit shorter. But this is a little bit from that interview, so you can just see what Peter Thiel is saying here.
It's not thought through. We don't think about what AI means for geopolitics. We don't think about what it means for the macro economy. And those are the kinds of questions I'd want us to push more.
There's also a very macroscopic question that you're interested in that, will pull on the religion thread a little bit here. You have been giving talks recently about the concept of the Antichrist, which is a Christian concept, an apocalyptic concept. What does that mean to you? What is the Antichrist?
How much time do we have?
We've got as much time as you have to talk about the Antichrist.
All right. Well, I could talk about it for a long time.
I think
I think there's always a question, how do we articulate, some of these existential risks, some of the challenges we have, and they're all framed in this sort of runaway dystopian science text. There's a risk of nuclear war. There's a risk of environmental disaster, maybe something specific like climate change, although there are lots of other ones we could come up with. There's a risk of, bioweapons. You have all the different sci-fi scenarios. Obviously, there are certain types of risks with AI. But I always think that if we're going to have this frame of talking about existential risks, perhaps we should also talk about the risk of another type of a bad singularity, which I would describe as the one world totalitarian state. Because I would say the political solution, the default political solution people have for all these existential risks is one world governance. What do you do about nuclear weapons? We have a United Nations with real teeth that controls them, and they're controlled by an international political order. And then something like this, is also what do we do about AI? And we need global compute governance. We need a one world government to control all the computers, log every single keystroke to make sure people don't program a dangerous AI. And I've been wondering whether that's sort of a going from the frying pan into the fire. And so the atheist philosophical framing is one world or none. That was a short film that was put out by the Federation of American Scientists in the late 40s. Starts with the nuclear bomb blowing up the world, and obviously you need a one world government to stop it. One world or none. And the Christian framing, which in some ways is the same question, is Antichrist or Armageddon. You have the one world state of the Antichrist, or we're sleepwalking towards Armageddon. One world or none, Antichrist or Armageddon, on one level are the same question. Now, I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but sort of one question is, and this was a plot hole in all these Antichrist books people wrote. How does the Antichrist take over the world? He gives these demonic, hypnotic speeches, and people just fall for it. And so it's this plot hole. It's this daemonium.
It's implausible.
It's a very implausible plot hole.
Right.
But I think we have an answer to this plot hole. The way the Antichrist would take over the world is you talk about Armageddon nonstop. You talk about existential risk nonstop. And this is what you need to regulate. It's the opposite of the picture of Baconian science from the 17th, 18th century, where, the Antichrist is like some evil tech genius, evil scientist who invents this machine to take over the world. People are way too scared for that. In our world, the thing that has political resonance is the opposite. The thing that has political resonance is we need to stop science. We need to just say stop to this. And this is where, I don't know, in the 17th century, I can imagine a Dr. Strangelove, Edward Teller type person taking over the world. In our world, it's far more likely to be Greta Thunberg.
Okay, I want to suggest a middle.
One other. Let me have one more here. This one's shorter. This was the Hoover Institution. Is Peter Thiel being
if
interviewed
the Antichrist were to come to power, it would be by talking about Armageddon all the time. And
Peter Thiel, the Antichrist would talk about Armageddon all the time. He'd scare people and then offer to save them.
Yes, it's the 1 Thessalonians 5:3. The slogan of the Antichrist is peace and safety. And so, which is nothing wrong with peace and safety, but you have to sort of imagine that it resonates very differently in a world where the stakes are so absolute, where the stakes are so extreme, where the alternative to peace and safety is, Armageddon and the destruction of all things. And then that's where peace and safety gets you way more than it would have in 1750.
Here you have a man who's not a believer. He's talking about he's quoting the Bible. And he's saying the Antichrist slogan when he comes is going to be peace and safety. That's exactly what the Bible says. So we have a lot of people out here, people that you wouldn't normally think of talking about the Antichrist. One thing I want to mention about that I think is interesting is you have all these people, secular people, talking about the Antichrist, and people in churches don't talk about the Antichrist. It's upside down. They're observing what's happening. Hey, we're with this AI and with all that's happening, all the technology, we're headed to a one world, despotic, totalitarian state. And people in the church, again, he's talking about how the world's going to sleepwalk into Armageddon. The church is just sleepwalking. People never talk about these things. Well, another point here, Peter Thiel has a 4-part Antichrist lecture series at a San Francisco forum. It was on, the first one was last week. It was September 15th. There's going to be one Monday on September 22nd. There's going to be one September 29th. There's going to be one October 6th. You can't take any kind of paper in there with you, your phone. It's all top secret. You can't go in there and write down what he's saying. But he's fascinated with this topic here of the Antichrist. Some people are calling this right now Peter Thiel's Antichrist World Tour. And again, he's got this 4-part lecture series that's going on. He's been on Joe Rogan as well. Now, let me just give a little backstory. This is a fascinating thing. I think you'll find this fascinating. So I've been doing a lot of listening to Peter Thiel and what he's saying. Last weekend, I went and spoke at an event for Dallas Theological Seminary up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And one of the folks who works here at DTS told me that the president of Dallas Seminary, Mark Yarborough, actually has developed a relationship with Peter Thiel. They've corresponded with each other and talked. So I got Dr. Yarborough. He's the president of Dallas Seminary. I said, tell me about your interactions with Peter Thiel. Well, he told me that Peter Thiel read a book by John Walvoord. Many of you who know John Walvoord is kind of the dean of Bible prophecy, a past president of Dallas Seminary. He read one of his books. And a common friend of Peter Thiel and Mark Yarborough, Peter Thiel was talking to this man, telling him about reading this book by this president of Dallas Seminary. And then the man said, well, hey, I know the current president of Dallas Seminary, Mark Yarborough. And Peter Thiel said, I've got to talk to him. So they began to try to set up a meeting, and they finally set it up for Mark Yarborough to go to his house in Washington, D.C. And they met for 3 hours. And Peter Thiel asked Dr. Yarborough to walk him through the book of Daniel. And he said when they got to Daniel chapter 7, he's just fascinated by it. One other thing that I found fascinating, Dr. Yarborough took him 6 of my books to give to him as well. So, because Dr. Yarborough is not a prophecy expert, but he gave him 6 of my books. I don't know if he's read them or not or whatever. But Dr. Yarborough said he's going to talk to his friend and talk to Peter Thiel and try to see if he can set up a meeting with me with him. So that'd be incredible. Be able to meet this guy. I mean, the guy's brilliant. He went to Stanford. I mean, he's got a PhD in philosophy and mathematics, all these things. But he's fascinated with this idea of the Antichrist. He's searching. And he sees what's coming in our world today because he knows more about it really than anyone who's alive today. That's a little bit of backstory here about all this, why I've gotten so interested in this topic here in these last few days. Now, let me just kind of give one more a quote here to kind of set the scene for what we're going to talk about. This is a quote here from Arthur Bloomfield. He wrote a book years ago, How to Recognize the Antichrist. It first came out in 1975. Now, think if this doesn't sound like today. He says, when prophecy begins to be fulfilled on the grand scale that is indicated for the end of the age, perfect conditions for the rise of any number of false teachers will be in place. Now, listen to this. He says, the times will be intense. That's what we have today. Everything will be at the maximum. The greatest advances in science, the greatest destructive power in the hands of wicked people, the greatest war of all time threatening to break out, the greatest activity in the forces of the heavens, especially in the evil spirit world. The most sensational and unexpected changes will come about. Everything will be expressed in extremes. Exaggeration will be almost impossible, and with it will come the most marvelous and miraculous prophetic fulfillment. That's what we see today. Those words, intense. Everything's at its maximum. Exaggeration will be almost impossible. That's the world that we live in and we see today, a world that's prepared for the rise of the coming Antichrist. Now, just a little backdrop here again for you all. The word Antichrist occurs 5 times in the New Testament, just 5 times in 4 different verses, and they're in 1st and 2nd John. And you'll know if you read in 1 John, it talks about many antichrists are here and coming, but then it talks about antichrist singular. So there's going to be many antichrists, small a, plural, but there's going to be one antichrist, large a, singular, who's coming. So all the flow of Antichrist will lead to this one final Antichrist. Dr. Dwight Pentecost, had the privilege to study under Dr. Pentecost at DTS. He's kind of referring to this word Antichrist because the prefix anti can either mean against or it can mean in place of or instead of. And I like the way he says it. He says, Satan is seeking to give the world a ruler in place of Christ who will also be in opposition to Christ so that he can rule over the world instead of Christ. And so that's this ruler who's coming. Now, that's the most popular title that we know of. You know, we call him the Antichrist, but there's also a lot of other aliases that he has. He's known as the little horn. We'll talk about this in a moment. Daniel 7:8. He's a king insolent and skilled in intrigue. He's the prince who is to come in Daniel 9:26. He's the one that makes desolate in Daniel 9:27. He's the king who does as he pleases in Daniel 11:36. He's the foolish shepherd, Zechariah 11:15. He's the man of lawlessness in 2 Thessalonians 2:3. He's the son of destruction. In other words, he's doomed to destruction. He's the rider on the white horse in Revelation 6:2, and he's the beast out of the sea in Revelation 13:1-9, and in Revelation 17. It's interesting, Joe. John Lennox in his book has a title for the Antichrist I'd never heard before because he's called the beast who comes out of the sea, and so John Lennox calls him the sea monster. And I like that. He's the beast that comes out of the sea. He will be the ultimate sea monster. Now, before we get into a few details here, I want to just mention this because sometimes people wonder about questions like this. Why spend time thinking about the Antichrist? We're going to say in a few moments that I think that we won't know who the Antichrist is. I think he'll be revealed after the rapture. So you say, well, why should we think about who the Antichrist is? Why should we worry about this? Let me give three quick thoughts. One is there's a great deal in the Bible about him. There are about 100 passages in the Old and New Testament together that tell us about this future coming world ruler. Well, if the Bible spends 100 passages telling us about this person, then God obviously wants us to know who he is. Now, we don't want to be focused on Antichrist. We want our focus to be on Christ. But God wants us to know about what's coming in this world. So that's the first reason. The second one is this gives us confidence that God will ultimately triumph over evil. The Antichrist and the false prophet will be the greatest concentration of evil in two human beings in human history. And in fact, there'll be a false trinity of Satan, the Antichrist, the false prophet. And when we read in the Bible that God will ultimately overcome Satan and the Antichrist and the false prophet, the greatest concentration of evil in history, that gives us confidence that God can overcome the evil in our day. So it just gives us confidence that God's in control of what's happening. And if God can take care of the evil trinity in the future, he can take care of whatever evil we see in the world today. And then a third point, it helps us see how current events around us are working to set the stage for his coming. We know about him. We know what he's going to be like in the future, and we can already see events being set up. We can see a preview of that today. It gives us an indication of where we are on God's prophetic calendar. So those are just a few basic reasons I think it's important to know about the Antichrist. Now, what I want to do here in our time together, the rest of the time now and this afternoon, is give a profile of this coming world ruler. We could call this a sketch of the sea monster, or we call this the biography of the beast. But 10 keys to his identity. Now, I know many of you here know a great deal about prophecy. Some of you may just now be kind of getting interested in prophecy. So some of this may be basic for some of you. Some of you may have never heard some of this, but I think it'll give us a full portrait of this coming ruler. So we're going to look at the Antichrist coming. His origin, where he's going to come from, his character, his career, and then finally, we'll spend some time looking at his collapse. Now, here's the first key point that I think we need to understand if we're going to develop our profile of this coming world ruler. He's going to appear after the rapture takes place. That's my contention. He's going to take place, going to come on the scene after the rapture. Now, the rapture, I believe, will be the greatest turning point the world has ever known. It's going to be the greatest event in human history since the universal flood. The world will never, ever be the same after the rapture. And I think a lot of the things now that we wonder about, well, how's this going to happen or how's that going to happen in the future? A lot of those things are going to be sorted out when the rapture takes place, because it's going to be an earth-changing, earth-shattering event that's going to occur. So he's going to appear after the rapture. Now, 2 Thessalonians 2, 3 through 7 is where I get this from. So Paul, when he writes to the Thessalonians here in 2 Thessalonians, they've received some letter. It's a spurious letter, a counterfeit letter, somebody professing to be Paul, claiming to be Paul, who's told them that they're in the day of the Lord, that they're in the tribulation. He'd written 1 Thessalonians to them, telling them about the coming day of the Lord and the rapture and the tribulation. And now they get a letter from somebody saying, hey, you're in the tribulation period. So Paul is writing 2 Thessalonians to clarify kind of the order of future events. And he says in verse 2, I don't want you to be quickly shaken from your composure or disturbed either by a spirit or a message or a letter as if from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. By the way, this is interesting. If Paul had taught them that they would go through the day of the Lord, through the tribulation, and someone wrote them a letter telling them that they were in it, they wouldn't be that upset, right? I mean, they wouldn't like it or enjoy it, but that would have been what they expected. So the fact that a letter came to them telling them that they're in the tribulation and they're so upset about it, to me indicates that Paul must have taught them that they weren't going to be in the tribulation. That's why they're so upset by this. So to me, it's a kind of an implied argument for the pre-trib rapture.